Good morning, one and all. Let's start with Unit 2, Demand and the Law of Demand. Why do you think that goods command prices? Some goods are very expensive, while some goods are cheaper. Goods command prices because they are scarce in relation to their availability. Goods like air, like which you get, which are free gifts of nature, they are known as free goods. There are other goods which command a price and which you purchase using your currency rupees. These goods are known as economic goods. They are scarce in nature and that's the reason they command a price. Sellers are prepared to sell them at a price because buyers are ready to shell out an amount for that particular good. In this chapter, we'll be learning about the meaning of demand, the law of demand, the determinants of demand, the demand schedule, or what you call the tabular representation of demand, the graphical representation of demand, which is the demand curve, and the various different types of demand. So let us start with what is demand. Basically, demand consists of three parameters. The first one is your desire or a want. Second is willingness to purchase or buy that good or commodity. And the third is the ability to purchase or buy that particular commodity. Now, what do you mean by parameters? Now, these three conditions need to be fulfilled in order to say that your demand is complete or you have fulfilled your demand. When I talk about desire, desire is something you wish for. Say, for example, you wish for a Mercedes, or you wish for a Versace watch, or you wish for an Audi car. All these different desires and wishes each of us have. But do we have the ability to purchase the commodity? A Mercedes may cost you around 50 lakh rupees. Do I have the ability to buy that particular car? So being able to purchase the commodity plays a very important role in order so that your demand is fulfilled or your demand is complete. Second thing comes your willingness to purchase. You may have the ability, you may have the demand, you may have the wish, you may have the desire. But if you are not willing to put away with your wealth or your money, you will not be able to fulfill your demand. So, for example, a person has a desire to buy a particular car. He is also able to buy that particular car, but he is not willing to shell out that much money to buy the car. Now, you may want to buy a palace, but you don't have the demand for it since you are not able to buy it. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride, like it's rightly said. Now, to have your demand, you must have the ability to purchase it. That is, in economic terms, you should have the money to buy it. Second is willingness to buy it. If you don't want to buy it, you don't have the demand. For example, a miser, he has the ability to buy a car or he has the ability to buy a palace because of the enormous wealth he owns. He also has a wish or a desire to buy it, but he is not willing to put away the money or to shell out that much finance to buy that thing. So, if these parameters, all three parameters are not fulfilled, your demand is not going to be complete. So let us move on to the law of demand. What do you mean by the law of demand? Ceteris paribus. The word ceteris paribus means all other things remaining constant, which means there are certain factors which, if kept constant or which, if kept in place, your law of demand will prove true. Any change in these factors will not allow your law of demand to be true. According to the law of demand, whenever the price of a commodity increases, obviously the demand for that particular commodity is going to fall down. And vice versa, when the price of that particular commodity decreases or falls down, the quantity demanded for the same commodity increases. Now, what are these factors which affect the law of demand? For example, if you have income, even if the price of the commodity is high, or even if the price of the commodity is increasing, and at the same time your income is also increasing, in this case, the quantity demand will not come down. Instead, it will increase because there has been a change or an increase in your income. So as to keep the law of demand true, we need to keep income as a constant factor. This shows that there is an inverse relationship or an indirect relationship between price and quantity demanded, which means you can see it as the price of the commodity is increasing, the quantity demanded for the same commodity is falling down. And when the price of the commodity is falling down, the quantity of the same commodity is increasing. This holds true for any general commodity or product which commands a price. This is the reason we see that the demand curve is downward sloping to the right, which shows that a fall in the price of the good is going to increase the quantity demanded. Whenever you are plotting the demand graph, you will see to it that anything in terms of currency, like maybe rupees, dollars, yen, will all be marked on your y-axis, whereas all the quantity demanded, which are sold in terms of units like number of tables, number of potatoes, number of chairs, will all be marked on your x-axis. So as the price reduces, the quantity demanded for the goods increase, and as the price increases, the quantity demanded for the goods decrease. We will see how to plot this graph using a demand schedule. So we see here that the demand curve is sloping downwards to the right, which shows that price and demand have an inverse relationship. On to the next topic, that is the determinants of demand. Okay, there are certain factors which will shift the demand curve either to the left hand side of the original demand curve or to the right hand side of the original demand curve. Now, what are these factors? The first factor which shifts or which might change the demand curve to the left or the right is population. The larger the population, the higher would be the demand. Now, even the structure of the population plays a very important role in affecting the demand. Like the population has been divided into 3 categories. First is 0 to 16, then is 16 to 60, and then is 16 years and above. 0 to 16 and 16 years and above are the dependent population, and they majorly depend on the incomes of the working population, that is between 16 and 60. Second, income. If consumers have more disposable income, which means the real income, which means the purchasing power, how many units of a commodity can they purchase with the income they are currently earning? So if they have more of such income, they are able to afford more of such goods. And if they are able to afford more of such goods, then the demand is definitely going to increase. Third, related goods. Related goods are nothing but the substitutes or complements. Now, usually a substitute good can replace another good. For example, if Pepsi becomes expensive, you have more of the customers shifting to the buying or purchasing of Coke. Or you can take 2 different brands of TV like a Sony or a Samsung. Now, if the price of the substitute falls, like if the price of Samsung falls down, the quantity demanded of this will also fall, because now consumers will find a cheaper option in Sony. Complement goes with another good like strawberries and cream. If the price of strawberries increases, the demand for cream will fall. Why? Because nobody wants to buy the strawberry cream anymore. Next, advertising. Advertising is nothing but displaying and persuading the customers to buy more and more of the same commodity over and over again. Nowadays, you see most of the brands are selling their products either using celebrities or using kids. For example, you have McDonald's, which is trying to sell off their Happy Meal by showing that they're going to give some kind of a free toy. Now, children at this particular point of time, using their pesta power, are trying to persuade and coax their parents to buy them a Happy Meal, even though the prices of such commodities are high. So, a lot of advertising may also bring about change in the quantity demanded. Second, advertising also changes consumer loyalty for a particular good. So if I'm using Dove for a long period of time, but the Sunsilk ad persuades and coaxes me to buy Sunsilk, I may shift from Dove to being a Sunsilk loyal customer. Next, tastes and fashions. Demand curve will also shift if the consumer taste changes. For example, first we demanded for physical books. Nowadays, you have most of your information and knowledge available to you online. Like most of us read e-books rather than purchasing those books. So, because of tastes and fashions, the demand curve may shift from its original position. Second thing, even for example, uh, you can say digital watches are now in vogue and in fashion. So even if the prices are high, which the demand law of demand says that the prices should be low so that the demand increases, but in this case for digital watches, even if the prices are high, people would want to buy that digital watch only to remain in fashion, or it's used as a show off tool. Next, expectations. This is nothing but the price change in the future. A very good example is today's lockdown situation, wherein people were stocking up goods even if the prices of the goods were so high, because of the only fact that in future the prices may even go higher. As a result of which, even in the current situation, even if the prices are high, they are buying these goods because they know in future if we wait, the prices are even going to soar higher. Same is in the case of the share market. If you know that the prices, for example, for Infosys is high today at 2000 rupees, but tomorrow it may reach 2200 rupees, there is an obvious possibility that I purchase the shares today even if the prices are high. So these factors need to remain constant so that the law of demand, which states that the price is high, demand quantity demanded goes low, needs to stand true. And last of all, it's the seasons. Demand usually changes according to the season. Like in the summer, the demand for ice cream, sun lotions, sun creams, all of them increase. And during winters, you have woolen clothes, the demands for soups, all of these increase. So we need to keep the demand season factor also constant, so that when we are explaining the law of demand, we know that we can prove that the law of demand stands true. Now we know demand is a downward sloping curve which slopes from the left to the right, which was already explained earlier. Let us move on to the types of demand. There are various demand can be categorized into different types, like depending upon the interdependence of the demand. The first we move on is to individual demand. What do you mean by individual demand? For example, individual demand refers to a demand for a certain good by one single consumer. So, for example, if I go to the market and I am buying 5 pieces of dairy milk chocolate, so my individual demand would show that I am buying 5 different pieces of dairy milk chocolate at 5 different prices available. It is like the same household demand, or maybe individuals in a particular house, they are demanding a particular good for self consumption. That would be an individual demand. But if I talk about my demand or my household's demand in comparison to my neighbor's demand, and if I compare two of these, so it will be individual A, that's me, and individual B, that's my neighbor. Together A and B would make up for the market demand. So the sum total of the demand by all the households or individuals, this is known as market demand, and it is nothing but all the quantities of goods that the households, they are willing to buy at various prices during a given period of time. Let us look at the market demand and the individual demand. So we have Helen, she has demanded a certain quantity, and we have Ken, who also has demanded a certain quantity. Now, when I add the quantity demanded by Helen and Ken together, we get something which is known as the market demand. Okay, so at a particular price, say for example $1, Helen is demanding 14 units and Ken is demanding 7 units. So the market demand at that particular price is 21 units. Now, how do we plot the market demand schedule? we are going to add up the number of individual demand schedules which are available to us, sum them up, and we get a market demand schedule. Okay, so here we are going to plot the market demand schedule in the same way we have plotted the individual demand schedule. We are going to put all the prices on your y-axis and all the number of units of coffee which is demanded on the x-axis. Plot the points together, and that's where we get the downward sloping demand curve. Okay, the next kind of demand is the ex ante or ex post demand. Now, these are two different kinds of demands. Sometimes it happens so that when we go shopping to buy a particular shirt or a particular pair of jeans, what we end up buying is 2 pair of jeans and maybe 5 set of t-shirts. This is what happens in reality. So, ex ante is what we were planning to buy. Ex post is what we have actually bought. It can be the other way around as well. We go to a particular store to buy 5 units of pen, but the shopkeeper has only 2 units of pen. So what we wanted to buy was 5, but what we actually bought was 2. So sometimes the ex ante can exceed the ex post or vice versa. Next we move on is to the joint demand. What do we mean by joint demand? When a product is jointly demanded with some other product, we call it joint demand. So when the demand for two or more goods are demanded together, we call them joint demand, like car and petrol, butter and bread, milk and sugar, the car and tire. All of them are a part of the joint demand. Now, what happens in joint demand is the rise in the price of cars will not lead only to a fall in the demand for cars, but it will also lead to a fall in the demand for petrol. Because if the prices of the cars have increased, no more people are going to purchase cars, as a result of which the amount of petrol which is going to be used is also going to fall down. Next we move on is to the derived demand. What do we mean by derived demand? For example, the demand for a commodity which arises indirectly because you have demanded some other commodity is called derived demand. Now, the demand for steel, for example, it is strongly linked to the demand for cars. So if we demand for cars, indirectly we are demanding steel. So steel becomes a derived demand. Or we're into construction of buildings where we require a lot of steel. So we would not order for steel directly, but we would want a house. So indirectly we are asking for nothing but the derived demand, which would be steel. Same is for, you can say, for wood. You need to buy a cupboard. So cupboard would be a direct demand, but wood, which the carpenters would use, there the carpenter would also be a derived demand. Next we move on is to the composite demand. Composite demand means a particular good is having multiple uses. For example, when you're demanding steel, you may need steel for making utensils or for making buses or trains. You have room coolers and so on. Next, another example could be milk. Milk can also be used for cheese or for yogurts, cream, butter, and all other products, including using it as a fertilizer. Then you have land. Land can also be utilized in different ways, like agricultural land, urban land, construction of buildings, etc. Okay. Let us move on to the next topic, which is, why do you think the demand curve is downward sloping? The demand curve is downward sloping because of many reasons. First one is the income effect of the consumer. So why do you think the demand curve is downward sloping? Or why does the demand curve slope downwards? What is the explanation of the law of demand? It is nothing, but it is just to show that there is an inverse relationship between price and the quantity demanded. Now, there are various reasons, of which the first reason is the law of diminishing marginal utility. What do you mean by the law of diminishing marginal utility? Utility is nothing but usefulness. Let's move on to diminishing marginal utility. Okay. So, Utility is nothing but the usefulness you are deriving from a commodity or the want satisfying power of a commodity. For example, you have played football and you have come back home. The first thing you would want is a glass of water. Now, the first glass of water gives you ample of utility, which means you are so very satisfied after you have the first glass of water. But sometimes the first glass is not enough, and the second glass gives you a higher utility or usefulness than even the first glass. Now, to measure utility, we use a virtual unit which is called utils. So if I had my first glass of water, I may have derived 5 utils of happiness or satisfaction. When I get the second glass of water, I derive 7 utils of happiness. And then when I take the third glass of water, I derive 8 utils of happiness, which means after having every subsequent glass of water, my utility or my want for that water, it is satisfying. The satisfaction power which that water has keeps increasing. But there comes a time where when given the fourth glass of water, you deny having the fourth glass, or you feel after having the fourth glass, you might even puke out the remaining 3 glasses of water, which was already had by you. So, the want satisfying power of a commodity or the utility of a commodity increases in the initial stages. Then comes a point where it gets constant, and after that, the utility or the happiness or the satisfaction that commodity gives you starts falling. Another example could be you are going to buy a pair of jeans, a black pair of jeans. The shopkeeper hands over the black pair of jeans to you. You are so very happy. If you want to buy a second pair of the same kind of jeans, now when we talk about marginal utility, the product needs to be homogeneous, which means they have to be same in size, in pattern, in color, in design, and everything. When I get the second pair of jeans, what happens is I am all the more happier that I am carrying 2 pairs, which maybe if one unavailable, I can make use of the second one. Then comes the third pair. I am not so happy. Maybe my satisfaction would remain the same. When given the fourth pair of the same commodity, it's somehow irritating and depressing to collect same units or the same design over and over again. So my satisfaction starts falling down. Now, according to the law of diminishing marginal utility, as the price increases, my marginal utility for the same commodity will come down. So, as a customer, I would purchase a larger quantity of the commodity only when its price falls, because the marginal utility or the utility which I am deriving from the subsequent units are going to fall down. So initially I may pay a larger price, but I know in future the utility of the commodity is going to fall down, so I will buy larger units only when the prices keep falling down. So according to the law of demand, when prices rise, demand falls. But in this case, when the prices are going to come down, I might buy more units of the commodity. So therefore, you would have a negatively sloping demand curve, which means satisfaction decreases when I keep consuming the same good over and over again. The second would be the income effect. Okay, for example, a McDonald's burger costs you around 150 rupees. Now, when my income increases, I am able to shell out that particular amount and buy the burger. Earlier, I was not able to pay that much because my income did not allow me to do so. Now, any change in demand because of change in income, because of the change in the price of the commodity, is known as income effect. Now, when the price of this commodity falls down, like the McDonald's burger falls down from 150 rupees, now the consumer can buy a larger amount of the commodity with the amount of money he or she owns. This is because now he is able to save more money than he earlier did. So now when it fell down from 150 rupees to maybe 100 rupees, I could use a little more of my savings and buy 2 of those burgers. So the opposite is true. When the prices rise, consumer is less able to purchase something. So when prices are high, the quantity demanded comes down. Next is the substitution effect. One more reason why we see that the demand curve is sloping downwards is because of the substitution effect. Now, what is substitution effect? It is nothing but changes in the prices of the substitute goods has reduced the quantity demanded on the current good. Now, for example, if the price of Coke falls and the prices of the substitute, that is Pepsi, remains unchanged, what happens to Coke? It is relatively cheaper than Pepsi now. Now, what consumers will do? They will normally like to substitute cheaper goods for the costlier ones. Another example is if the price of coffee falls, the price of tea remaining same, coffee starts becoming relatively cheaper. So, coffee will start having more of customers as compared to tea users. So if there's a substitute of a good, you will be less willing and able to buy the good if you are getting the substitute at a cheaper rate. Next is the increase in the number of customers. What happens when you have a larger population or an increase in the number of customers? When the price of the commodity falls down, obviously the quantity demanded is going to increase. That's the law of demand. But at a very high price of a commodity, only a few rich people will be able to afford that commodity. But when the price starts falling down, what happens? More and more people will start trying to buy that commodity, even those who are having a moderate income. This tends to raise the demand for that particular commodity, and therefore the total demand for that commodity starts increasing. For example, if you are having oranges at 200 rupees a kilo and you bring the price of the oranges or the demand for the oranges or the prices of the oranges in the market comes down to 100 rupees a kilo. Initially, only those who could afford the 200 rupees bought oranges. But now, because of the drop in the price of the oranges, the people who are having a moderate income can also afford those oranges because the prices have come down. So this increases in totality the number of customers. Next and the last one is several uses of a commodity. Now there are some goods which have many uses. When the prices of such commodities are very high, they will be used only for those purposes where their importance is more, and therefore only a small quantity will be demanded. Like, for example, if the price of electricity is very high, it will only be used for lighting purposes. But when its price falls, you can use it for other purposes as well, like that of cooking, as a result of which the prices will come down and the quantity demanded increases, thereby shifting the demand curve to the right. Now let's see the demand schedule as already explained later. These are the various prices and these are the various quantities demanded at those prices. We plot them down on a graph and this is what we get. That's a downward sloping demand curve. Now, what happens when the price changes? When the price changes, the quantity demanded keeps changing, as a result of which you can see that the demand curve is moving upwards. If the price has come down, you can see that the demand curve is moving downwards, which means when the price falls down, the quantity demanded increases. So this is nothing but it's called either an extension of demand or a contraction of demand. Extension of demand means quantity demanded increasing. Contraction of demand means quantity of demand reducing. So you will plot them on the same graph. So point A shows extension in demand, point B shows a contraction in demand from the original demand curve. Okay, now let us move on to the last part of the topic, which is the exceptions to the law of demand. There are certain things or certain goods which do not fall in the category of the law of demand, which means that the prices of such goods, even if they are increasing, the demand for the same goods would be increasing, and if the prices are reducing, the demand for the similar kind of good or the same good would be decreasing. Now, why does this happen? Law of demand does not always operate in all the cases. There are situations in which the inverse relationship between price and amount purchased does not hold true, and therefore these are known as exceptions to the law of demand. In the exceptions of the law of demand, you will not have a downward sloping demand curve which moves to a right, but you will have an upward moving demand curve which moves to the right. So it would look like this. That means as the price increases, quantity demanded also increases. Okay, let us take the first example, which is Jiffin goods. What do you mean by Jiffin goods? Now, Jiffin goods are very basic products, or you can actually call them inferior products. And most of your low-income households, they rely on such products. For example, if you talk in India, it could be jawar, bajra, those kind of cereals. Now, Robert Jiffin was one of the statistician or an economist. Now, when he was walking down the streets of London or England, that is during the Victorian era, at that time, bread was the basic foodstuff for those who were at the bottom of the socio-economic ladder. Now, what happened when the bread prices increased? The poor households did not have an alternative to bread to switch. The only option or alternative which was available to them was meat. Now, meat was very expensive. So, in spite of the bread prices increasing, people still ended up purchasing more of bread and less meat, because bread was the only thing they could afford. Now, if the price of the bread rises, what happened was the marginal utility of money for them had started to increase. Okay, now this Jiffin goods, Robert Jiffin had explained about the paradox that demand was growing even though the prices of the food was growing, because of the missing alternative. So if the poor people had to choose between bread and meat was anyways very expensive, so they went in for bread. Now, if you take for the current examples, you see in China, noodles, wheat, rice, all of these are considered as Jiffin goods or for the lower income households, whereas you have the different kind of exotic animals which they have, which are considered for the higher group of people. Even kerosene as a fuel can be considered as a Jiffin goods. Now, what happens is when the real income or the purchasing power of the consumers increase, they can shift from the relatively inferior good that was bread to a relatively more expensive good which was meat. Okay, so that was all about Jiffin goods. Next, we move on to Veblen goods. Veblen goods is nothing but it relates to articles of social status, of social prestige, or you can call it show-off items. Thorstein Veblen was the first person who brought out this term of Veblen goods, and he considered these goods as items of conspicuous consumption, which means ultra luxury items, okay, or spending a huge amount of your income on luxury items. It's nothing but because there were rich people who wanted to display their economic power, and possessing those high price goods, maybe like diamonds or platinum jewelry, made them an item of social prestige. So, according to them, even if the prices of such goods like diamonds or platinum, or owning a Louis Vuitton handbag, or Jimmy Choo shoes, all of these, even if the prices are high, people would still, the richer group would still buy these goods because they wanted to display their social power. Now, if the prices of these goods come down, it means it is lowering, or the economic value of those goods are coming down, which would no more stay as a social status, as a result of which people would stop buying these kind of goods. Let's take an example of iPhones. When iPhone wanted to position their product in India, it positioned their product as a Veblen good. Now, usually Veblen goods have a niche market as compared to a mass market. Mass market is a place where goods are available for everyone at a reasonable price so that more customers can enjoy it. In comparison to a niche market which has a very few or limited number of customers, and they are more customer loyal, like for example, if you have Armani or you have Jimmy Choo, you have all these brands who have a limited customer base, and once the pricing of these goods come down, the customers wouldn't want to buy these because it would lose the value in the eyes of the people. Okay, the third one, expectations of future prices. Now let's take the example of the lockdown situation today. Even if the prices of the goods are high, people still want to buy those goods because they know in future there would be a shortage of these goods, and as a result of which they would buy and hoard the goods even at high prices today. So lockdowns could be one situation. You would have war, you would have strikes, all of these situations which would force the people to buy goods even if the prices are high. So the law of demand says the demand would be low in case the prices are high. But if the expectation or the forecasting that in future the prices are going to go even higher, the goods would be sold even today at that particular higher price. In contrast, during a depression, they will buy less even if the prices are lower. Next, we talk about the quality-price relationship. It's similar to the Veblen effect, which means that higher priced goods is giving you something more. See, it's the perception and the image in the minds of the consumers, which they feel that if I shell out 3 or 5 rupee more, I'm getting something better, so why not? So if you have two items, maybe a Lux soap and a Lux Supreme soap, and there is a difference of 3 rupees. People would but obviously go in for a Lux Supreme soap thinking that it's going to give you something much more as compared to a normal Lux soap. So they take price as an index of quality. Usually price is related to the quality of the product. So even if, in these cases, even if the prices are higher, people will still buy, and if the prices are lower, people are going to refrain from such items. Next one, change in fashion. Now, when a particular commodity goes out of fashion, even if you are bringing the price down, people are not going to purchase, so the quantity demanded will still remain low. And those products which are in vogue, like digital watches, even if the prices are higher, people are still going to buy those because they are in fashion, they are in vogue. So, ladies or women will not purchase a large quantity of women wear or fashion wear even if the price is reduced. And I'm talking about those goods which may have gone out of fashion. Okay, so let's review the questions now. What we have done, or we'll recapitulate them. This is to be done by you at home regarding this as a worksheet. So we're going to do what is demand. So we know those 3 conditions or 3 parameters. Then what is the law of demand? We can talk about the inverse relationship between price and demand. What were the three things that caused demand to have a downward slope? Then what is the law of diminishing marginal utility? The hint here is you have come from football and you're having a glass of water. What is the income effect? So you talk about income increasing and in relation to the quantity demanded. Same is for the substitution effect. And on a graph, you are going to show the extension and the contraction in demand with a relative change in the pricing strategies. Graphs are to be drawn for the following questions. You have the price of a latte at Starbucks, which has been raised from $4 to $8. What do you think has increased or decreased the quantity demanded? I need a graph for the same. And movie tickets at Edward Cinema, which were $11, it has come down to $5.50. What do you think increased or decreased? So you're going to give the factors which were affecting or which brought about such change in the quantity demanded. Thank you. Hope you've enjoyed the session. We'll continue with the next topic in the next video.